Within the Media Studies course, I use various pieces of software to construct my work as well as make documents about research and analysis from data that I had found. Before my Media Studies course, I had used Photoshop in my secondary school, so I had knowledge on its basic functions and some slightly advanced features which were useful to me throughout the project. However, I had never even heard of Adobe InDesign prior to my Media Studies course, so the layout functions and how it works was entirely new to me. This meant that I had to learn its basic functions and the layout of it before I could start on my project work. As I was working on my preliminary exercise, I decided to use InDesign for the majority of it, so that I could improve and develop my skills. I learned about scaling in InDesign and positioning images within a bleed and slugs on the page, as well as adding text and getting them fit into certain areas of the page. Although these are simple skills, they were very useful for me when constructing the pieces of work that I needed to create for the preliminary exercise. In the preliminary exercise, my Photoshop skills hadn't really improved at all, as they were already to a decent level. Therefore, I stuck to learning InDesign and only used Photoshop when I thought that I needed to. After completing the preliminary exercise, I had found that even though I hadn't used Photoshop much, that my skills in photo editing had improved slightly as I manipulated images to change their colours and turn them black and white. Turning images black and white isn't that difficult, as you select the image layer that you would like to turn black and white and then go to the image tab. After that, choose filter and then black and white, and you are able to turn the image black and white. The image which I had edited was used in my magazine and contrasting well, so that although it is quite a basic skill, it was still effective and improved the quality of my product. After completing the preliminary exercise, I had become confident with InDesign. I knew how to set up master pages, which includes guidelines, as well as the actual magazine pages which conform with the masters. I could then add the photographs as well as the masthead, which I created in Photoshop, to my product according to the guidelines. InDesign had become a very useful piece of software at the end of the preliminary exercise, as I could construct documents effectively when using it, as well as know different functions which are useful to me. I learned to take advantage of how precise it can be with guidelines and rulers, as well as ensured that all information could fit in their chosen places while ensuring that everything looked tidy. Just like software, hardware was quite difficult to get the hang of, but after finishing the preliminary exercise I understood how to use them. The main example of this is a Canon DSLR camera, as I used this for photography. My photography was not particularly good in the preliminary exercise, and I ended up taking around 100 photos, and the ones used were not very good. However, they show how my skills have improved slightly throughout as they gradually began to get better. At the end of the preliminary exercise, I have some confidence in using one of these cameras, however, not that much. I slightly understand lighting and focus, but have still acquired some photography skills that are useful for me. Throughout my main task, I use Photoshop a lot more, as well as continuing to develop my skills in InDesign. I decided to learn more about photo editing and manipulation, so I use Photoshop to try it out. I'm interested in quite unique styles of photographs, so I got an image of the showroom which I took and edited it. I made everything black and white besides the blue glow around their logo and the words showroom. This required me to modify different layers and add a layer mask, however it turned out good and I had learned how to use layer masks. I also got the same image and did an RGB split. This is where the colour layers are split away from the primary layer, so they are visible and look like they are warping around the primary layer. This is a very nice looking and interesting effect, so I wanted to try it out on one of my photographs. This required me to learn about colour layers as well as distortion tools. I sheared the red and blue layers to distort and separate them from the primary layer, so that they ended up being clearly visible. The shearing tool appears as a box with a line going straight down. You click on the line to create a point and drag it to warp the layer. Usually this would distort the entire layer, however because I was using colour channels, it only modified the red. I did this again with the blue channel, however I moved a few points in the opposite direction to the red ones, meaning that the colours split away from each other and overlapped in some places. The effect looked quite nice on the image, and I had learned something new about image editing. After doing the RGB split, I had acquired skills and knowledge around sharing and using the colour channels in Adobe Photoshop, as I hadn't used these tools before, and I had to use them various times to learn how they worked before I could start sharing colour layers and creating the RGB split effect that I wanted on the image. For InDesign, I used the skills that I had acquired from doing my preliminary exercise, as well as developing my skills even further through modifying shapes and editing sizes of text and images to fit appropriately. Overall, my design skills and creativity were expressed in the main task as I decided to try new things and make my magazine more unique in comparison to the preliminary exercise. At the end of the main task, I had learned a lot more about Photoshop and how effective it can be when improving images quality and making them unique by modifying them and putting different overlays or effects on them. I had found out how the different editing tools worked as well as layer masks, so I was more confident in making products in Photoshop to transfer to InDesign. InDesign was still somewhat tricky to use, but I had gotten the hang of using it for its basic functions, so I could create my product effectively. I utilised my skills when it comes to designing and preparing for creating the magazine through guidelines on master pages. Guidelines were a useful tool as I could drag them from the ruler and leave them in place I wanted. It worked with values, so I could place it at a certain point on my magazine and then line up a box with some text or a set of images, mean that the design of my magazine is a lot neater. I didn't learn many new things about InDesign as I had acquired many skills from doing the preliminary exercise. However, I did manage to understand the layout of InDesign and how to get everything displaying in the best quality, so I know how it will look when created, as well as make creating the magazine easier, and it gives more of an insight into which aspects look the best and which may need improving quality wise. The Canon DSLR camera was also a very useful tool whilst creating my main task product, and I had learned a lot of new things about photography throughout the main task. My photographs were better quality after doing the main task in comparison to the preliminary exercise, which shows my skills improvement. In my photos, it is evident my skills to do with lighting and focus are a lot better as the images are actually in focus at the time. I also focused more on aspects of mise-en-scène, like the scene as I went out to places to take photos instead of the photo studio, and shot types as I used a variety of shots such as long shots and three-quarter shots. Overall, the composition of the shot was more of a focus throughout the main task than it was for the preliminary exercise. Research and planning for both my preliminary exercise and main task used similar media platforms, as I used Pro Tools, Prezis and different questionnaire formats to produce my research as well as analysis. These media platforms let me display data in various and unique ways, allowing it to be more interesting to consume. Planning was created as physical copies through documents like progress checkers and booklets, which allowed to plan what needs to be done by what point. I also constructed thumbnails in paper form before turning them into master pages to get an initial idea of what I want my magazine to look like. Adobe Premiere is a very effective and useful piece of software which allows me to edit my videos for the evaluation. The software has many functions which allow clips to be cropped and edited, as well as the ability to modify sound so that the audio can be good quality and effective when running adjacent to the video clips, making a unique and good quality evaluation question response. Overall, all the pieces of software I use are effective at their jobs. They allow me to create products or documents and modify them with unique and different features, which result in the creation being effective. Photoshop let me edit images which I could then put into InDesign. InDesign allowed me to construct my preliminary and main task product, and both Prezi and Adobe Premiere helped me create an analysis of my product. The questionnaire let me create questionnaires which were easy to answer due to a simple layout. There aren't many disadvantages to these pieces of software, as they are very effective at their chosen function and I could utilise them quite well. The only one I had a bit of trouble with was InDesign, and that is because the layout can be confusing when first using it, as well as scaling and moving images being frustrating as it works via two different boxes, so a lot of time I clicked the wrong box and ended up having to press undo a few times. But apart from that, all the software was not too difficult to use and was effective at helping me complete the task.